The Philadelphia 76ers still hate Doc Rivers. I'm not surprised by this fact, but what I am surprised by is how openly they seem to be about this overall concept. In this video, I'm going to break down a couple different comments from players on the Sixers, ones that have surprised me coming out, and take you step by step why I think they're right, why I'm surprised they're saying it, and just the overall outlook now that the Doc Rivers experience is finally over in Philadelphia. Before I dive fully into it, I do want to make sure that you guys are hitting that subscribe button. At this point in time, 87.8% of you guys have not subscribed to the channel just yet. We have plenty of awesome content coming out right here on Sixers Digest throughout the length of the season. My name is Barnard. I'm going to be with you every step of the way this year from wherever this season takes us with the Sixers. So make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button and staying locked to the content. I'm excited about everything that is about to go down. Now, what got me into this concept today and why I wanted to make this video was, number one, this quote here from Paul Reed. This quote from Derek Barnard, who reported this. A couple different reporters were on this, but Barnard tweeted out, Paul Reed said, quote, "Last season, if I was taking threes, I probably wouldn't have played for like 10 games. This year, they want me to shoot the ball more. I'm still making the adjustment and realizing where my shots are going to come from in this offense." So for starters, he's right. That I think is hilarious, that if we saw Paul Reed doing what he did in preseason game number 1, we probably would not have gotten to see Paul Reed play for the length of a season. That the city of Philadelphia, all media members, all people had to bang the table just to get this guy Paul Reed to play over the corpse of DeAndre Jordan. But now that he is in a Nick Nurse system, that there are some expectations. The man has gotten a new contract. Expectations are different for Paul Reed. And I think the biggest factor in frustrations with Doc Rivers, I don't want to say the biggest because there was a lot, and I'm going to get into a couple of them here. But one of the biggest factors was the lack of leash for young players. You have to allow young guys to play through their mistakes, to figure things out. Guys aren't going to be perfect the second they come into the NBA. That's the beauty of basketball, that each of these guys are improving day in and day out. So let them do that. If Paul Reed struggles in a matchup, it's going to make him better in the long haul. I know a lot of Sixers fans, myself included, were on the side of seeing this happen more, that we know exactly what we have in whatever is left of a DeAndre Jordan or an Andre Drummond or a Dwight Howard or whatever washed up backup center had rotated through. When you have a young guy like Paul Reed who has potential, who's getting better, who's improving in areas, let's see it. And I know Paul himself wanted nothing more than be able to work through his mistakes. I think he deserves a ton of respect for the effort level that he leaves on the floor. That's one of the things that has attracted to him as a basketball player, was the way that he does compete on a play-by-play basis. He leaves it all on the floor. But unfortunately, these things did not get recognized by Doc Rivers quite as much. But it is not just Paul Reed who is throwing these digs at Doc Rivers. And it is funny to me because Paul Reed is very much one of the primetime examples that there was a Paul Reed versus Doc Rivers thing about it after the final game of the second year of Paul Reed's career. Basically, it took a full media meltdown of pressing, why isn't this guy playing? Why isn't Paul Reed getting an opportunity? Why do you feel better about DeAndre Jordan? And Doc Rivers got all defensive, saying, look, we'll play Paul Reed against small ball lineups. We'll play DeAndre Jordan against bigger centers and true centers, which is not what he did for the entire season. Finally, for the final game of the season, Doc Rivers had his moment where he said, whatever, let's go look at why Paul Reed isn't ready. And Paul Reed responds by dropping 20 and 10 in his first opportunity in expanded minutes. And that is when Doc Rivers had the famous quote of, "This is not the Paul Reed victory tour." That is the same guy. This is the same guy of Paul Reed getting his lick back a little bit in this situation. But it's just not Paul Reed. He's not the only one. And I think it's especially funny that these are not the focal points of the Sixers throwing out these little digs here. Here's a quote from Daniel House, who was a guy who had his own battles with Doc Rivers. And Dan House said, quote, "Doc Rivers is two guys ball dominant. Nick Nurse is everybody play together, everybody work for each other." He's right about that as well. And for Dan House specifically, he was a guy who saw himself on the outside looking into the rotation for just about the entirety of last season, right up until playoffs, where all of a sudden he began to earn himself a role and got his opportunity at that point in time. And Daniel House is absolutely right about the style. That is the biggest thing that I am bought in this year from the Sixers' perspective, where I think that they have room to grow as a team. As much as Joel Embiid and James Harden get criticism for their lack of impact in late game or coming up in big moments, they need help to get it done. And having the offense of basically give these guys the ball and everybody else watch is just not effective offense. When you watch a team like the Denver Nuggets, who have all these off-ball sets, they have guys running design cuts, moving off-ball, creating other shots. That has never happened in Philadelphia. That is so much, and over the past 3 years under Doc Rivers, the offense literally became give it to Joel Embiid at the elbow, and then everybody space out and watch. While Joel Embiid is very talented, and there are issues that come with building around a center because of the way that he plays, you just have to adjust to this. You have to have at least off-ball options, have cut. It can't be so stagnant. And that is one of the reasons why the Sixers failed to get past the second round all 3 years under Doc Rivers. That offense is not going to work in late game postseason. It's too predictable. It's too easy to guard. And as we begin to see some of this more team-oriented offense that Nick Nurse is already starting to put in place for the Sixers, that is where this team ceiling can continue to raise. So Dan House is right about that quote there. Now, another guy that I wanted to bring up who took a little jab is Jaden Springer. Springer's another guy who has his beef with Doc Rivers. He checked the birth certificate. Jaden Springer was not old enough to crack the Doc Rivers rotation. To this point in time, through 2 years in Jaden Springer's career, he's played 93 minutes at the NBA level. I'm not saying Jaden Springer was ready for a regular rotation, but it is insane for a guy who was a first-round pick, has been in the NBA for 2 seasons now, to only be seen that much as a sample size. Now, this is the year that I think we can begin to judge Jaden Springer as a player, that I do think he's improving. I don't think he was quite ready at the time, but I still would have liked to see more of him than we did. And what the quote from Springer is here is, quote, "He came out strong," third-year guard Jaden Springer said, this about Nick Nurse. "I can tell he's a coach that really wants to help the players learn and wanting to teach. He was stopping drills and stepping in and giving us points on what to do here and there. I haven't seen that too much since I've been in the league." Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Jaden Springer has been in the league for 2 seasons and has had 1 head coach. So it's very funny to kind of hide the little dig in, I haven't seen that much since I've been in the NBA, when you're only talking about one guy here. But this is an example of why Jaden Springer is right also, that I'm sure he specifically is a guy who came into the NBA at 18 years old, was still a sponge, was still learning, was still improving as a basketball player. He would love to feed in as much learning as he could possibly get. So when you're kind of overlooked by a guy like Doc Rivers, who I believe kind of threw him to the side as he'll get there in a couple years, he's not there now, and we're focused on winning now, so kind of let him develop at the G League level, that's frustrating for a guy like Springer. So I am excited for Nick Nurse, and especially because Springer is the type of player, and what I mean by that is a hard-nosed defender, guy who's laterally extremely quick. There's an argument for him to be the best perimeter defender on the Sixers right now. His shot is developing. He showed some really good instincts as a cutter in that first preseason game, which I was especially thrilled by. There's a lot to like about his game, and I do think Nick Nurse can jump out and get more out of him. And I'm not surprised that the Sixers team as a whole has their frustrations about Doc Rivers. For starters, we know who he is as a guy that wants to take all the credit and none of the criticism. And the thing that especially left a sour taste in my mouth, and I'm sure many of the players feel the same way, was immediately after being fired, Doc Rivers hopping on the Bill Simmons podcast and essentially wiping his hands of any blame of the Sixers era. This quote I especially wanted to bring up here, and he was asked about the after effects of the process from a culture standpoint. And Doc Rivers said, quote, "Yeah, you can feel it all through the organization. Elton, when he brought me in, that's what he told me. Hey, this is not about coaching the team. We're bringing you in here to change the culture." And he meant everywhere. He allowed me to come in and we looked through the entire organization. Trainers, equipment managers, everybody. If you're not on board, if you're not trying to win, and that's not what you're breathing every day, it's time to go. I meant that with everybody in the organization. Overall, I thought we were starting to get it done. You could see the change in culture. I think the growth of that is there, and I think there's growth to be made in that department as well. It was very media alert is the word that I'm using, and sometimes you can't worry about that. You just have to worry about the basketball part of it. But their culture has definitely gotten better, and I had a big part in that. The growth from there still has to get better, and if that happens, they have a chance. If it doesn't, Bill, they're not going to win. It has to keep growing. So Doc Rivers has some sort of point in here. I do think that he played a role in trying to change the culture here, but I also just want to bring it front and center that the Sixers are in the exact same place they were before Doc Rivers entered this organization, that they, for 3 consecutive years under Doc Rivers' leadership, failed to make it past the second round. That is why you were brought into the Sixers organization, not to change the culture, to win a championship, to get them past that second round barrier that they had failed to get by under Brett Brown. You did not do that, Doc Rivers. You have to wear that. You failed in that regard, and he does not do that. That he wipes his hand. He talked about what a challenge it was coaching James Harden because of the tough factors that come with his style of play and them kind of fighting about what style is best. There was a lot of just frustrating quotes from this interview, and it was, as I put it before, it was him washing his hands of blame from the situation. Doc Rivers is not the sole reason the Sixers failed to make it past the second round those past 3 years, but he absolutely played a huge part in it. That he was not the guy the Sixers hoped he was in terms of a basketball X's and O's technician. He's a guy who ultimately will age as one of the more overrated head coaches in NBA history, and a guy who unfortunately has not developed and adjusted as the game has continued to. As basketball has progressed, Doc Rivers has not, and he has been left behind because of that. Now enter Nick Nurse, who is a guy who is an X's and O's tactician, who comes from the modern brand of basketball, who has a more concrete understanding and a more expansive brain when it comes to what to do. That is why there is room for excitement for these Sixers. That is why there is room for optimism. I've said it many times that I believe bringing Nick Nurse in is more valuable than any singular roster move the Sixers could have made, and I am excited about the overall effects of it. But for now, the Sixers can keep getting their digs in, keep getting their licks. We're going to have Doc Rivers on the call for ESPN games this year, so he will not be going fully away. But I do kind of like that they are letting their feelings out here. For what it is what it is. Let it fly at Doc Rivers. He has kept it coming and earned it and not kept it quiet. This is the same guy who publicly questioned if Ben Simmons could be a point guard on a championship team. Same guy who is at least a part of back-to-back meltdowns of all-star point guards within the organization. I'm not saying Doc Rivers is all the problem, but he's absolutely a part of it. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know your favorite Doc Rivers criticism. If there's any kind of digs that I missed from guys, let me know in the comments. Appreciate you guys for tuning in once again. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.